schedule, I'll start skimming in and start just by welcoming everyone to the Practice Teaching event. This is on online and blended learning, notes from the field. This is going to be structured with a panel. We have 2 experts and 2 people experimenting as innovators in the field who are currently PhD students at the Divinity School. So we will have 10 minutes for each of our panelists to offer some notes, and then we'll have a discussion from 12:40 to when we end at 1:30 for people to ask questions or our panelists to ask each other questions. I have some quick announcements first. This is we're coming to the end of our practice teaching events for the quarter. We still have more. We're co-hosting an event with the Ethics Club. They were interested in doing a workshop that's drawing out the merit of student comments to elaborate them into a discussion. That will be on the 18th. And then on June 8th, they'll be back for a philosophy of teaching workshop, which is kind of cornerstone of a teaching portfolio on the job market. So, without further ado, I'll introduce our panelists. First, we have Bill Rando, who's the director of the Chicago Center for Teaching here at the University of Chicago. Our second panelist is Evelyn Joy Benthenick, who's the associate director of pedagogical innovation at the Graham School. And then our 2 PhD students are Adam Miller, who works in history of religions, and Aaron Hollinger, who's in theology. So I'll turn it over first to Bill.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for coming to join this conversation. So I decided that what I want to do is give the 30,000 foot view, which is to say a little bit of context about online teaching and learning. And part of that means a little bit of history, because particularly when we think about some of the attitudes that you may have or that your colleagues may have about teaching online, I think understanding a little bit of the recent history, I'm talking about even the last 10 years, is helpful. From my perspective, I think, this panel, there are 2 questions that I'm thinking, trying to explore, which one of it is, why should I care about online teaching and learning? Why should I be paying attention to this? And if I am interested, what can I do about it? The opportunities are not many here for graduate students to do online learning. And if they are, they're not always visible. So if I'm interested, what can I do about it? And if I do decide to start engaging using online tools to reach my students or reach new students, how can I do it well? And so those are 3 things that, 3 questions that I have in mind. So, but let me back up and talk about kind of how we even think about online teaching and learning, at least in this country right now. I was reading an article from International Educator, which cites so much of how people think about online teaching and learning is still embedded in the idea of MOOCs. Does everybody know? Raise your hand if you know what a MOOC is. So almost everybody, MOOC is a massive open online course. Or is it online open? Okay. Massive open online course. And I don't know if you guys were around or paying attention back in, say, 2008. Back in 2008, and the years that followed, 9, 10, and 11, this country, especially the world, but certainly this country, I can't necessarily speak for the whole world, but certainly the United States got hit by what can only be described as sort of a MOOC tidal wave. It was freaky. As a person who's been, director of a Center for Teaching for the past 30 years, I've never seen anything like it. Every conference, it was all anyone was talking about. MOOCs. It was all our organizations. I have an IB Plus group, I have a national group, and for those years, MOOCs, massive online open courses, online teaching. It was really quite intense. Some people describe the height of this intensity happening at around 2011, when two very famous computer science faculty members from Stanford, Sebastian Thrun and Peter Norvig, decided to make an online course about artificial intelligence. And this thing, maybe you were aware of it, sent shockwaves across the world, basically. I want to quote this article when they said, and the article says, when the two decided to take this course, to take their course, Artificial Intelligence, online and offer it free to students anywhere in the world, they quickly attracted 160,000 students from 190 countries, despite very little publicity. Okay? There were famously more students from Lithuania enrolled in the class than there are members of Stanford's entire student body. This was, and this was at the height. So, a couple of amazing things here to me. Number one, it was amazing that higher education was in the news, like, for years, right? And two, that higher education was in the news because of teaching. I mean, this just doesn't happen. It was quite something exciting, but also maybe terrifying. And to many people it was terrifying. And so there was a backlash. There was a huge, quite a considerable backlash around many academics about this tidal wave called MOOCs. And there was a backlash about the overblown claims of what online teaching could do and would do. And there were even a number of people who described the MOOC phenomenon as an instrument of neocolonialism. As another way for powerful countries to invade places with fewer resources in this country. There were questions. Is this really education? What will this do to the traditional classroom? Is this the end of the traditional classroom? Is this the end of the faculty role? And of course, the ever-present question, what are the motives here? Why are we doing this? Why do we really need classes with 160,000 students taught by two people, whatever. So the point is that in the ensuing years, this otherwise innocuous tool, online teaching became highly polarized in the academy. And then the wave, as waves do, dissipated. And here we are now, some 10 years later, or not even 10 years later, and the environment that we're in now is in part was created by that MOOC craze. The MOOC craze that most people agree is kind of over. Doesn't mean there are no more MOOCs. Universities are still creating and making MOOCs. They invested a lot of money in this stuff. Professional education and accreditation education is often organized online, but they're not MOOCs anymore. They're what we sometimes call SPOCs, small private online courses, seem to have taken, maybe people are just more comfortable with them. Many universities and departments of all kinds, because of this giant wave, committed to and continue to teach a few courses online every year. And I'm still surprised. Colleagues of mine all over who say, oh yeah, I teach 3-2, and one of the courses I teach is online. Very common. So, but not overwhelming. That's the better. But maybe the bigger thing is that this tidal wave of MOOCs saw a huge rush of new technologies that are on our campus, on campuses all across the country. And what is more common now is that these technologies are being used within the context of traditional classrooms, blended classes, flipped classes, and this is true everywhere. So the idea that the technology of online learning is not so much, it's not in the news anymore, for one thing, but it's happening. Okay, the craze may have ended, but the work has not. So as people are moving into the faculty field, or graduate students and thinking about your career, I do think it is helpful for us to continue to ask questions about enhancing our pedagogy with the technology that is online. And so asking questions like, can online technology enhance the learning of my students? That's still a legitimate question to think about. Whether even if you're teaching in a traditional way, is there something is there a tool that I could use to make my students' learning more powerful? But if I were to do this, how would I have to change my teaching? And maybe when I get a job and I might get asked to teach a course this way, how is that going to change my teaching, and would I like that? Is that still the kind of teaching I want to do? Maybe yes or maybe no. And then I think we also have to ask the question, if I'm teaching in my field and I'm not employing online technologies in some of the ways that we're going to see, I think, here today, if I'm not employing, what are my students missing? You know, is there some learning experience that I could be giving my students that I'm not giving them because I haven't employed this technology? And I think these are interesting questions to think about as we look at the examples today. But so that's our context, and now I'm going to hand it over to Emily to take us down from 30,000 feet to maybe not quite zero.
So I'm Emily. I work at the Grand Story College, which is the University of Chicago Continuing High School. And we have a unique place where you get to do a lot of innovative projects and work with interesting technologies. So, like Bill was saying, it's hard to find opportunities to do stuff online. You were talking about that and universities do. We do very cool stuff with online, like more like these spots, Bill was mentioning. And all sorts of things that I'm happy to talk to you about. And I think I want to mostly talk about how do you think about online teaching instead of thinking of it as just a set of technologies maybe, or as a suite of gadgets that you can use, really about, the goals you have for your teaching, which I think for all of us is typically, how do I engage my students in this? How do I have deep conversations? How do I really pull out their insights and make them see the text or whatever material we have? Sometimes people think that with online teaching it's less fun and it's less personal, and I would say it's one of those things that you're doing wrong. So one of the things to focus on when you start thinking about teaching online or using more technology in teaching is how can I really use this in a way to convey more of my passion for this text? How can I use this to really bring out the personality of students? How can I make this how can I use this to make my class and my teaching more personal? And I like to focus on how to build communities of your students using technology, how to use tools to make conversations happen inside and outside of the classroom in more engaging ways. You may hear terms like flipping classrooms or something along those lines, which is really just thinking about how do I use my class time, face-to-face time, to really be more engaging and interesting. One of the reasons I think that the MOOC craze has died is because it's a very impersonal experience. It's very individual. You can watch a lot of videos by yourself. You can talk to people online, but not many people do, and the technologies are not built in a way that emphasizes that. One thing to learn about tools is tools have inherent biases, so you need to be aware of those and make sure that that you're not looking at company. With the classes that we do that are smaller, they're private, so online only, for example, they're completely focused on discussion. So it's really much like the seminar. How do you, but instead of say, we're going to meet on Wednesday afternoon, we're going to talk about the meal for this entire week. And how do you scaffold conversations over time? How do you keep engaging people over time? And what's it like to have a conversation on a lesson? Those are the sorts of different kinds of ways you engage with teaching if you're using online more than you need now. And I would say if I were just going to give some quick tips that we can talk about more another time, and I'll probably have questions for these guys if you're interested in hear how they manage. But I would say that you, as the instructor, is still the most important part of what's happening with technology and the tools. Not even the content. They really think about it. Your ability to engage with your students. And when they're online, that's not your face, maybe. It's more your fingers. It's more how do you talk in text. How do you read what someone said and see what's interesting to pull that out. How are you present, even when you're not face to face. It's really thinking about this notion of presence, I think, in a different way. So that's a lot of what we experiment with at Bear and with my work. So presence, I would say, is the first tip. The other tip is you really have to actually plan out your questions. So I know that when I was teaching regular, sections and stuff, maybe I didn't think too hard about how that process can go. I know my text. I know in general what I want them to be talking about and thinking about. But when you're online, you can just, throw out a question and say, what was the most exciting thing about the year or something like this. You have to really think about what do I actually want them to answer? What do I really want them to think about? And to get people to engage online, you can't just stare at them. Just wait for someone to get uncomfortable. That doesn't work so well. Instead, you have to have a clear question. And not only do you need a clear question, you need to model that behavior. So if someone responds to that in a great way, respond to them. Answer them. Show what you want the other students to do. You're more than just a expert or person to ask questions to. You are a person in that conversation. You are interrupting as much as anyone else. And I think that's where Cassie's concept really not just being present in terms of I'm available, you can come around to that, but I'm present in this conversation. I'm invested in what you have to say. And you have to put a response to it, and then ask you to talk some more. All those are really just how you create the discussions, right? But online, it's the same thing, just slightly different. Clear questions, better articulation, and spread out over time. Am I missing anything?
About and the difference.
Yeah, I think it's so easy to focus on technology.
I would say just one thing, which is that people have focused on the barriers to engage learning that technology can create. But the fact is, there are also aspects of engagement that the technology affords. And I'll just give you one example. A faculty member in psychology who I worked with, not here, but my previous institution. And she had taught, I think it was at Normal Psych. many times in a setting like this, okay? And then for the first time, she taught it online in a small private online course with about this many students, but they were all over the world, but they were enrolled in the course. And she had what I sometimes call the Brady Bunch screen. I don't know, what is the formal name for that?
I mean, it's just a video.
Yeah, so but you know what I mean by Brady Bunch screen? You know, here's the story, and there's Jan, and there's Alice. But, you know, there's the whole class, and they're all, their heads are all bobbing, you know. And what she found, and what she said at the end, is that it was the best class discussion in Abnormal Sight that she'd ever had. There was something about those boxes that freed students to speak, and they had to listen more carefully because they don't, you know, because all the rules are different. So you have to be, you know, you're like at a heightened perceptual experience, and you would think, oh, who's going to talk in these little boxes? Well, everybody did, actually.
You can't hide your book.
You can't hide in your book, that's right. So, and she was surprised about that, right? And, anyway, that's what I...
Yeah, I would say so. Like, that's the synchronous example. Rather than talking about like asynchronous, so over time, synchronous spirit is this example where you're kind of mediating distance through online technology. So having, you know, Brady Bunch video screen, for example. And I think what works best, honestly, is when you blend those two. When you have something that's going on outside of your classroom, and whether you're synchronous time in the video screen or face-to-face in your classroom, the conversation is not contained within that time. It's really an ongoing experience. And we know from our research that students learn, most of the learning actually that happens in college happens outside of the classroom. Like, all the development of themselves and huge amounts of learning and content that they bring to their projects and the classroom happens outside. So being embedded in your life is important to really bring out their insights. And I'd love to hear how you guys have actually done.
To warm up. Yes. Yeah. Okay. You all set?
Okay, well, I want to thank Aaron for inviting me to be part of this panel, and thank everybody for coming. Let's give you a quick rundown of the course that I work with. It's offered through Central Methodist University. It's a small private Methodist university in Fayette, Missouri. It started out as just a proper campus university with NC classes, and recently they've been expanding their online offerings. The course I teach is called Religion and the Human Adventure. It is fully online and it's accelerated. From front to back, it is 8 weeks long. So it's pretty intensive in reading and writing. So I try to keep time constraints in mind when I'm assigning things. Most of my students are non-traditional students. It's kind of staggering majority are nurses for some reason. And most of them have children. They'll often report to me that they're working like 40 hours, 60-hour weeks, taking business on practice and stuff while taking 2 other classes. These people are beasts. I'm proud of them. I couldn't do it. So I'll just give you a quick tour to show you the kind of infrastructure I'm working with. The first page that you see when you sign in is just an announcement page. This is a dummy course for the future. There aren't any students enrolled in it yet. The announcement page is just where I put like stuff from the syllabus on usually. I mean, they have a syllabus, but I put the weekly assignments up on the announcement page so they have a convenient place to see what they're expected to be. The next page that I'll show you is resources and materials, which is where students can find the syllabus. essay assignments, study guides, things like that, and then required videos, which you'll see these views. Most of the videos that I assign are through just a film database through the university's library. And they're like 30, 40-minute long overviews of entire religious traditions, so they're not like super in-depth or anything, but they do the trick. I also will assign videos from YouTube. There's a guy, Andrew Henry at Boston University. He has a YouTube channel called Religion for Breakfast, and some of his videos are nice to introduce the study of religion and how it's different from theology and things like that. At least the kind of religious studies that I use. Unfortunately, I don't have a way to measure whether the students actually watch these videos, including the ones that are on the films database. Maybe there is, but I'm not able to look. The next page is, I'll show you the assignments page, and here I'll just open up a couple of weeks so you can kind of see what it looks like. As a student, you'll come in, you'll see that you have, during the first week, a number of assignments to do. Each week is pretty much 3 discussion forums and either a quiz or a test alternating. The first week there's an essay that's softball, like now that you studied religion for a week, what do you think, kind of thing. And then the last week there's an essay that's more intensive, expected to synthesize what they learned and all that. And then the real meat of the course happens in the discussion forums. Obviously that's where it has to happen. I have two stock assignments. You'll see the second and third of these two: Internet Resource Report and question. Using online tools in the online forum. The Internet Resource Report, I provide my students with links to religious studies blogs, like Religion and Culture Web Forum, or sightings here, the Bulletin for Study Religion, Word Study Project, all those kinds of things. And I ask them just to read a blog or listen to an interview and summarize it and kind of give their take on it. I think it's a way for them to sort of find sort of responsible sources for thinking about religion. There's a lot of garbage on the internet, so I'm trying to give them good sources to look around in. The third forum is just an ask a question forum. They can ask me a question, they can ask each other a question. It's really informal conversation. We're trying to mimic the classroom experience as best as we can. Much of the time I find my students just asking each other about points of confusion in what they read, and they help each other understand. And in the first forum, in both of these sets of 3, there are pages of them. The first one is really where everything happens. That's where I put my textbooks in conversation. So these are the textbooks I use. Just Gary Kessler's Studying Religion and Introduction to Cases, and Craig Martin's Critical Introduction to Studying Religion. I should say, I guess now, I've been teaching since August 2013, so I feel like almost 3 years. There's 5 terms per year, so I have a number of terms under my belt, not too many. When I first started teaching the course, I just inherited a stock syllabus with just Kessler's textbook, and the forum questions weren't super great. They were more geared toward it was like a religion appreciation course. Like one of the questions was something like, out of the Buddhist theory of Anatman or no self and the Hindu theory of Atman or self, which one do you like the best? Like things like that. Not the best. So I brought, just last summer I had the opportunity to redevelop the course. And so now my syllabus and these 2 textbooks are sort of normative for every other online teacher. I'm not the only teacher who teaches this class, there are 2 or 3 others. But so I brought Craig Martin's textbook in because he sort of provides a coherent, sustained theoretical driving engine behind it when he thinks of social theory. So each week I ask them to explain what Craig Martin is talking about in his textbook, in his real theory study, and then apply it to a case study that Kessler provides in his textbook. Some weeks I succeed, some weeks I do not. The most successful example of that practice is a chapter in Martin's book where he talks about myth as a way to naturalize
the socially constructed reality. And we're reading about the hymn to Purusha in Kessler's textbook, where the primeval man is sacrificed, his head becomes one cast, arms become another cast. So it's a kind of EG to illustrate what Martin was talking about. Some weeks I don't have anything that clear, so there's a problem there, and that's where I'm really trying to work on my courses, making it talk to each other better. How I guess I keep things rolling in the forums, I try to ask really leading questions. Like I have a point or two that I want you to get. So I just make it really clear before I give the question. This is where I need you to go. And then at the end of the week, after they've written their responses, the assignment is one initial post and 2 comments per, and they're working on this to make sure that they're engaged in a serious way. After that is over, I will put in the forum publicly a summation post that is way longer than what they're asked to write, and it clearly points forward, and when you get later in the class, it also reaches back to try to create a thread of conversation. And then when I'm grading them, I'll try to pick out like one strength in the post and like leave it in a private comment and one weakness or something like that to where they can like work toward changing how they're approaching it. And a lot of times they'll come with, studying religion as an academic is kind of difficult when you're a nurse or something, and you're being introduced to a discipline, so I'm trying to like help them mold rigor coming material for them. But let's see. I guess the course is always a work in progress. Like I said, I'm trying to put the textbooks into better conversation with each other, and I could very easily stand to put more time into responding individually to students. But I do what I can with like my workload and family requirements and that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I find that my students come out the other side sort of having arrived at the goal that I hope they will, and that is to use a certain set of critical thinking tools. We use religion as an example throughout the course, but I emphasize throughout the course that these tools can be used to talk about human culture broadly, and they seem to arrive there through application each week. It's guiding application advance. And they're also really happy to discover that the course is not just going to be talking about Methodist theology, which is what they think it's going to be. It's Central Methodist University. So they're typically surprised in that way, but yeah. I mean, the goal for me is critical thinking, not religious, it's not religion appreciation. That's not where I'm at. So I want to teach critical thinking, and I think that bringing these textbooks into conversation helps me achieve that goal. And I try to use technology to make that happen.
Thanks, Ed, and thanks again to Ken and Bill. Thanks to all of you. I'm proud to be far and away the least experienced member of the panel, and I'll give you my notes from the field on the basis of the one and only experience I've had teaching online from this past semester just finished, and I was sort of thrown not really in the deep end because there was a bit of hand-holding, but I get your sense of what it's like coming to this from zero experience and sort of having a first crack at it and seeing what that's like. I look forward to hearing suggestions of how this might be improved for the future. So this past semester, I've been teaching at Dominican University at the River Forest. I'm representing here the blended side of things, the web enhanced course. In that, this semester I have my own classroom teaching Introduction to Interfaith Studies at Dominican University. Conventional classroom, 3-hour seminar once a week. But when I applied for and was hired to teach the class, I was asked up front if I would be able to incorporate a online module or online course with several modules, the Interfaith Youth Corps, nonprofit organization, and you may be familiar with it. It works primarily with college students, not only to build both a knowledge base, kind of religious literacy component, but also certain kinds of skills and cultivate certain kinds of attitudes for promoting interreligious solidarity and dialogue among young people. So Dominican University and the Interfaith Youth Corps have worked together to create this online course that is intended currently to be attached to conventional classroom settings. People all over the country are doing it. So Dominican is kind of a flagship program where this is taking place. But it's available to teachers at any institution if they want to have an interfaith leadership component to a course that they're teaching. It was strongly suggested to me that this would be important for me to engage with, since this is Dominican, this is where this got started, and they want to be able to honor it. So on the one hand, I'm walking you through the history here, because I hope it's instructive. On the one hand, I had a lot of freedom with interfaith studies. There's an inherited course that had been taught before, but they said very clearly, do what you want, let's build your own syllabus, teach it however you want to teach it, but in some way, please draw on the Interfaith Youth Corps materials. So it was then up to me to decide how I was going to do that. And early on, I sort of decided, well, I can go one of two ways with this. There's surely more, but I thought up two ways of doing it. Either I can build my course around interfaith leadership as a kind of organizing problem, and then the Interfaith Youth Corps material that I've got as an expectation to expose these students to could be the kind of the core around which I'm educating other issues. Or I can make this material really work for me and the course goals that I want this course to have. I ended up going with the latter rather than the former. And as a result, the enhancement of my course by this web resource was surely more rudimentary than it might have been. I certainly did not put this to its maximal use, but I think it's a good way. I hope it's reassuring to see that you can inherit a sort of online expectation and do something actually kind of conservative and conventional with it, and I hope still effectively, while recognizing there's always more that's available. So what I ended up doing was treating the Interfaith Youth Corps course, this online course that can be attached to conventional classrooms. I wanted to treat it essentially as a primary text. So I'm teaching this course on Introduction to Interfaith Studies. I think if I designed the course, but if I had named the course myself, I probably would have called it Introduction to Interreligious Studies. Maybe that's inside baseball problem, but I think that I really want to be exposing students not just to the interfaith movement in the sense of people who are proactively engaging in interfaith dialogue for the sake of improved interfaith relations. That's a key part of what I'm doing. But I wanted them to experience that as part of interfaith interaction writ large, and a kind of history of interreligious entanglement, where, talking about EGs, and then the Interfaith Youth Corps becomes an EG of a certain kind of interreligious engagement that's by no means the only way to go. So I wanted my students to be learning how they're doing things and practicing, taking the Interfaith Youth Corps material, showing me it. I thought it was okay. Sorry, and we have this. So I wanted students to be experiencing what the Interfaith Youth Corps had created to lead students at any one of these institutions through the process of becoming an interfaith leader. I wanted them to have that experience, but I also wanted them to be operating on another register of saying, well, what are they doing here? What are the priorities? What's the rhetoric? We didn't ultimately get that deep into this material, right? That was a kind of ideal agenda that we only really scraped the surface. That was the kind of logic of it. What I ended up having students do, because I had, new teacher make the mistake that most new teachers make, which is totally overload the syllabus. Way too much reading, way too much going on. And I found my students struggle to kind of keep up with everything. So in the second half of the semester, I dialed it way back, I cut a lot of the readings out. And instead of asking everybody to watch all the videos and do, I knew I wanted to have them do some sort of presentation on these modules, but I ended up just splitting them into groups and having each group present on one module. And that's all they ended up being responsible for. So they didn't get too deeply into this. But, so say we had a group presenting on module 4, cultivating appreciative knowledge, which is a sense of, and I think they're hopeful that this is going to be more of a religious appreciation, and they talk about appreciative knowledge as a sense of not just learning factual data about tradition, but trying to get inside what's the internal logic of a religious community. Why is it that people think and behave the way that they do, with what sort of lines, with what kind of effective So if a group was working on this, I had them watch all the videos. These videos range from 5 minutes to 15 minutes, and most of them, not going to actually do much of this, most of them have people who tell.
Over the past half-century, the topic of diversity has become more prominent in American life and public discourse. Nowhere is this more clear than on college campuses. Student leaders are trained to identify, navigate, and support issues that arise due to racial and ethnic diversity, class diversity, and diverse gender and sexual identities. We have a radar screen for these different dimensions of identity so that we can better notice and pay attention to them. And interfaith leaders do the same thing for religious diversity.
Okay, thank you. So this is along the lines of the kind of videos. They're introductory videos where UPCal gives a sort of overview of the module. Then there are videos drawing on a lot of the actual people they've got in their orbit. Students from various college campuses where they work, people in nonprofits, a whole range of settings, talking about their own experiences, and it's organized in a very flashy and easy to digest way. They also have readings. I didn't choose any of these readings, and some of them were already on my syllabus, most of them were not. For the students that were given their group presentation, I wanted them to select at least a reading and try to guide us through what's going on there. Basically, I had students teach the class for half an hour on this material. On the one hand, trying to teach us what's going on in the module, but on the other hand, giving us some sense of their evaluation of the module in light of what we could do. So that was the dream. I didn't have them deal with any of the quizzes. I didn't have them deal with any of the discussions. And so that's where I made a choice that this was going to be a more conventional classroom, ultimately. Were I to do it again, maybe I would try to draw them more deeply into the discussion. Maybe I would have them on the weeks when they're presenting instead of posting on our in-class discussion board. Maybe I would have them forget that and instead post on the interinstitutional discussion board. It's one of the resources that they have, which seems to work very well. Any students in any of the institutions that are using the blended course in their own classes can interact with each other on the discussion board. So anybody in any of these sections across the country can interact with one another. And I think that maybe was a missed opportunity for me this semester, but that's something that's available. So that's a sense of what I did. Again, this was a pretty minimal web enhancement. But what's interesting, where I'll leave this, is that we are now in the Dominican theology department, now looking at what it would mean to turn this set of modules, which was designed for use blending with conventional classroom, what would it mean to turn it into an entirely online course? In other words, could we, and we're working on this summer as a project, trying to make it open more broadly to provide some sort of certificate in elementary interfaith leadership that would open this up beyond the confines of the classroom, still make it available for people who wanted to connect it with their classroom, but also provide opportunities for Dominican seniors, theology seniors, and interfaith study minors, things like this, to be involved. I mean, could they be the equivalent of a kind of online TA helping to steward the conversations, helping to draw on their experiences in the Dominican curriculum, maybe get credit or get some sort of additional certification through this. In other words, we're looking at both making this more fully online, but also trying to find ways to tie it back into the curriculum and use this as a way to enhance the learning experience of the students in the theology program. Always. So there's some interesting aspects of this on the horizon, but this is my first crack at online learning, and I'd be happy to hear others think about this. So should we maybe give panelists a chance to get a slice of pizza? Do we want to go around maybe and just introduce ourselves? I'm sure there are ranges of experience here.
Everybody yes to the pizza thing.
Yes. Why don't we let panelists get a bite, but we just go around and hear from you who you are and whether you have experience with online teaching.
I'm Nicole. I'm a graduate student in chemistry, actually, but I've been to many of the African teaching events, and they're all fantastic, so thank you for this. Right now, I'm adjunct teaching a section of general chemistry at Harold Washington College. So that is an evening course. We meet for a 4-hour block lecture on Tuesday evenings, and we have a lab on Saturday mornings. And this is the last week of the course, but in retrospect, I definitely probably should have increased the online component of participation, because a major barrier for my students also had jobs and were mostly nursing students and had families, and coming to campus an extra day was a significant barrier for a lot of them to do things like attend office hours or go to run the tutoring center. And I encouraged them to we had like a chalk site similar to this, and I had a discussion board that I was always like, a discussion board is a great place to ask questions, or you can email me. And eventually, after the first couple of exams, I got students regularly emailing me, but the discussion, I think that I should have started all in. I sort of like used the discussion board after I realized that there are these barriers to coming to campus as a band-aid measure, and if I had framed it from the beginning of the class, I think I could have done a better discussion online.
I'm Cecilia Lowe. I actually work for IT Services, and I support using technology for teaching. So you heard we're moving to campus. So we also provide support for other technology for teaching, so such as blog. So I'm here to see what you guys are using and how we can help better. And actually, I work with Emily. We produce some MOOC for this university. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Julie Price-T, and I work for the library. My role is e-learning, actually. So in all the ways that the library thinks about how to support research and teaching, traditionally, we also think about how to do that for online classes and online courses as well. That's one half. I also am a specialist for political science, public policy, and international relations. So it's a full plate, but I haven't taught online in the ways that we've been talking about today, but in the spirit of broadening what we think of when we think of online learning, I would say yes, I do have experience.
My name is Hector. I'm a second year PhD student here at the Divinity School. I have no experience teaching, except being a PA, of course, a long ago. But I know that's teaching Bill, so that's teaching. But I am proposing, I've made a couple of very preliminary inquiries, and they were received about building an online course for evangelical seminary for Christian workshop. So I definitely will help a couple of people here who can maybe help me a little bit with that. And I have a question. I don't know if we go around with questions later.
No, once we get around, we'll open it up for conversation.
I'll hold my questions to everybody.
Thanks.
I'm Nathan Hardy, a PhD student here at the Divinity School. I've used, chalk site and things like that in teaching, right? So especially distributing readings or handouts or prompts in ways that allow me to not have my act together by the time class is there. So on Friday or Saturday, for example, which has been really useful for me. And then they can submit responses to that same kind of thing. It's not really a discussion boards, but more than options to show. The most critically I've thought about online teaching my wife took a online animal psychology class, actually. But this was very much like, you have a textbook, you read it, you do these quizzes, you write 3 short papers, and then there's a midterm lunch that you have to go to a testing center to take. And just thinking about the ways that actually worked really well, because she had to closely read the entire textbook in order to teach the quizzes. But also that's not always the best use of your time as a student or as a teacher in your grade base. So I don't really have any conclusions about that as the level of our business.
I'm Will, I'm a first year MA, so I have a ways until I'm teaching, but I recognize that this is going to be something I have to work with one day. And I also, when I took 2 or 3 years off between my undergrad, I did 3 or 4 moves to keep myself busy. So I have an interest in doing something with internet teaching one day.
I'm Stephen Lower, PhD student here. I have a lot of teaching experience with books or
I'm Jacob Merlin, a PhD student here at Divinity School. I don't have experience teaching in an online format, but I think since MOOCs started, I've dabbled in and out different offerings, and I'd say I continue to be amazed about what is available free of charge. It's incomprehensible, some of the stuff that's available free of charge. It would have been 10 years ago. It's amazing.
My name is Ken Sawyer. I teach at the former seminary here in Hyde Park. I did my training here and at the library school. And as a recovering librarian, I have a particular set of needs in my face-to-face classes and my hybrid classes. And I'm just completing my 4th completely online course with students around the world, in Korea, in Afghanistan, in the Philippines, and across the U.S. 20 students. I also have some administrative responsibilities, and I know that as job seekers, you know that each of you who seeks a job will need to bring a readiness or a willingness, or even a set of skills that can be deployed online. The smaller the institution that you work at, the more likely that your supervising dean will be completely incompetent in online materials, and that most of your senior colleagues will be resistant. So this is an aspect of differentiation of your own readiness to serve, but then also to display the kinds of skills that should characterize the next generation of full-time faculty, so that there is an aggressive component of differentiation in the set of skills that any school that is sensible will be asking you for. So this is a curious time, but this conversation about online education has been in the humanities, has been going on for 20 years, and so this generous introductory conversation should also connect each one of us to the ongoing texts and best practices and strategies that characterize those who show their scars from online teaching.
Hi, my name is Harry Sertini. I am a PhD student here at the Divinity School in History of Religions. I haven't had much experience with online teaching, so far the only experience I've had is using Canvas and posts for 17 right now. Canvas much better than Talk.
Thank you.
But I'm still also learning, very willing to learn new perspectives to using multimedia and online teaching, and also to improve, for example, use of posts on Canvas and how to make that not just a way to check that the students have done the readings, but the way to improve the class interaction.
Hi, my name is Young. I'm a postdoc in Division of Social Science, and I was on job market this year. And the university I'm going to didn't require me to do online teaching though. The job market interview question, it was almost 80-90%. They asked me at least, what do you think about online teaching, or what do you think about blended teaching, or are you willing to do that. That was almost came out. So I'm very aware of it, and I think I should prepare for something very urgent.
Hi, I'm Wayne Kelly. I'm a classification coordinator and a PhD student at Divinity School. I'm kind of surprised that something hasn't been articulated, which is the kind of skepticism that's often felt towards online teaching, so I'm just going to voice for that for a second. I today in class in the philosophy department, and one of the things that's built into the students the importance of reading slowly and time taking with the students. So I'm interested in hearing about how to incorporate something like that in an online platform.
Can I just make a comment about something I heard, which is, there's a real tension. I mean, for my purpose, for myself, working with faculty and with graduate students, I'm aware that because there are a lot of robust opportunities for online teaching here. Okay? But out in the, as what's your name again? Young just said, I know for a fact that out on the market, it's a question that gets asked. Even 8 years ago, it kind of, a colleague of mine did a pretty quick scan of the Chronicle of higher ed. And this was early in the MOOC. This was like maybe at the height, which is still early in some ways. And I think 40% of the ads for faculty in the Chronicle listed among online teaching and learning experience. And I think it's probably more now because of so many more plagiarisms. But the point is, too, what I also find is while that might be in the ad, when the interview comes up, they don't need you to be an expert, right? And they maybe don't even need for you to have done it. But they want to know what is your attitude toward it. And that to me is a lot of what this event is about. Developing, that you have something to say about it. Now you, of course, are thinking of developing a course, but, can you imagine your course or something that you taught falling in these same ways? And that facility to say, I've never taught a course online. However, here's what I'm thinking about. You're in. I mean, that's enough. That's enough because as you can see, it's not, the skill is in the teaching, as Emily's. The skill in doing this well is your skill as a teacher. Your ability to frame and ask good questions. Your ability to listen in a seminar, or in this case, read what students are writing closely enough that you can investigate their thinking, right? I think, the putting it up online, probably there'll be somebody there to help you do it, right? But the question is, can you, no, not always? Okay. No help. No help. Okay, so I take it back. And some, I think in large universities, here there is, yeah. In many places, they have a staff that will help you do that, or a person. But what's more important is this. How do you think about this? Can you envision teaching your class online and how you're going to turn these tools into learning experiences and not just technical tools? I think that to me is, from my purposes, the most important element of this event is to give you a chance to start envisioning and thinking about what would it be like for me to teach a course online or partially online. Or what if somebody gives me an online tool, like a bunch of videos,
I mean, I think it gets us back at Marie's question too, which I'd love to weigh in on and invite others on the panel or otherwise to weigh in on this, that there's a lot of, I mean, certainly from the perspective of the job market, the people who are talking to you don't necessarily know except by discerning in the moment what their attitude is towards online resources. This has been a question for me from the beginning. I mean, when we started talking about doing this TED, was, and I think Emily got this too, it's not just about the suite of resources. How we didn't just want to come up here and say, hey, here's a bunch of things that you can do and teach online, but what are we losing teaching online? What are we gaining? What's the balance? And how do we try to find a way to teach well with certain kinds of approaches that we actually do want to prioritize. We do want to prioritize those reading. We do want to prioritize.
So you did it. How did you do it?
Well, I didn't really.
Okay, well, so that to me is an interesting conversation. Clearly you wanted to. Yeah.
So let me speak to this a little bit.
Yeah, please.
So we talk with me now, one of our alumni classes, over 6 weeks. And we know it's not very long. We have like 15 pages. It's not long at all. So we spent, say, 8 pages, a week on 8 pages. Not the slowest you could read, not the most you could read, but relatively. And we did that with a few different elements. I'll just describe this with one example. Evan Keller in Philosophy Classics is the faculty member who does this. And she started the week with a short personal video that she recorded in her office at her desk with her laptop. And she just gave a brief overview of these 8 pages, and she kind of drew out the important pieces she wanted to focus on, and then ended it with a question. And we assigned, these classes have no like test or grade, not that, but we still told them what to do. And what we told them to do was write a short reflection on this question, read the text closely, and reflect on it, and then respond to other questions. And, we had lots of alumni in this class, about 40 or so, who would do these exercises. And they were shockingly good. And they were close. And then on Thursdays, each week, they would get together for an hour in a video call, a nice Brady Bunch kind of thing, and talk it out. And Agnes, the faculty member, is so well suited to this. She has she's normal, kind of odd faculty member, like you can find in Chicago. But she just likes to talk about the media. She's good at pulling that conversation. She's a little blunt sometimes. If you make a stupid point, she's not afraid to tell you. Like, she was very good at just leading the conversation. And throughout the week, she would come in and respond to these reflections and maybe say, that's a great point, but what about this? Just the way that you lead a conversation. And I thought that experience of reading a text online together with girls of the world was probably our best class so far. And it was very different than something you may find in MOOC, which is, we've done it. So we did a fantastic one on neuroscience, which is great. But it's not the same thing as the close reading. I guess my point is, you have to think about what you want to convey, and then find people to help you, if you need, to think about what's the best strategy for that. How can you support that and make it robust, even in this different context?
So what impresses me about that is how simple. You know what I mean? What you're talking about. Let's see. You go and you make a video to sort of look your students in the eye and say, this is what we're going to read. Here's a little piece of background when it was written. Now here are some things I want you to think about as you're reading this. Here are the questions I'm going to be asking you, and I want you to think about. This is
One of the things Aaron said when you were talking was like, oh God, maybe I didn't do it right, or maybe I just didn't. Nobody does it right all the time. Like, I think that's one of the biggest barriers. The feeling of I'm not an expert in this, or I read something, or whatever. Like,
It's been recorded, therefore it has to be perfect.
No.
I know, you know what I mean?
That is the best way to do it wrong, because then you don't feel like yourself. You don't look personal, you don't sound personal, you sound like a robot.
This is one of the problems we would show the youth corps videos, and students would be sort of chuckling because it didn't feel real in a certain sense.
Right.
But they were so polished.
It was great, but the videos were so polished, they were so finely honed that there's a sense that you're like looking at a piece of art instead of actually engaging in something. You're not having a conversation, but it's still. I think one thing you're pointing to here, and I don't think about this too. One thing you're pointing to is the power of, for close reading, just the bare requirement. And if you've got 1,500 students in a class, you can't read all these things, but just the fact that they're doing, the fact that they're writing a 300-word response on a page of the email, and then required to respond to 2 more book people's like that, they're already doing what that they're learning from without needing to go through and respond to everyone individually or.
And it's changing from like, I have to read it. I don't have to read it. And I don't have to comment it. But I have to make sure that they're reading and responding. Your job changes a little bit. So being able to adjust your perspective to where you fit in the Sorry. What is your other question?
The way that I try to get close to happen is just through asking the leading question, like being really precise. It's really like almost as simple as that. It's of course not the same as like being in a classroom with other people and talking. Just ask a question that helps get them thinking about something like be vague. Like I ask tricky questions. We talk about legitimation. I'm doing this because X, Y, Z. So I have to think about the difference between religious and non-religious legitimation. That's a trick question. And then at the end, I tell them it's a trick question. And they all try to think about it.
I had a question about how does the potential audience of the course influence your objectives, your assessments. You mentioned that, Adam, you mentioned that your audience or your clients are usually, this is the second or third priority in their lives, in their professional, or they have 2 jobs or whatever. So they do this, 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. or something like that. Versus the case of Aaron, that could be, more the typical student that's fully invested in, at least education will be number 1 on the list, and most students also work and all this stuff, so I don't want to generalize too much, but there are different audiences for sure. You're probably more adult, they're not even, they might not even be, they're doing religion as what do you call this, elective, instead of being a religious scholar. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, elective is good too. It's hobby.
Hobby's a good one, yeah. So how does that change your actual structuring of between the 2 years?
Well, I take into account, like, pretty significantly what other people are doing in their mind. Literally, like, 3 kids, 2 jobs. Like, I can't ask too much. That'd be ridiculous. And second, I should note that my class is a stock, but they all apply to Central Methodist and all students there. And they pay, and it's accredited, and I can pay, and the most students I've ever had is maybe 60 tops. It's actually only 20 people each.
60 is a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's not too bad. Not 60. But yeah, I take that into account. I lost what I was going to say.
So you take into account what you plan, your objectives, you also take into account when you grade assessments, or it's always...
Yeah, when I'm grading especially... Oh yeah, the other thing I was going to say is it's not... I'm in a really strange situation. My class is not an elective, it's required. And because it's a Methodist university, And I'm pretty sure I have an overwhelming number of nurses because of some strange change in Missouri state law about nurses who are at one level who want to be another level have to get a BA. So, of course, they're already practicing nurses, so they turn to online education. And my class is required, so it's just like floods of nurses. Like they're not in it because they want to be there, which I also have to do. They probably don't care, and if they do care, it's because they're healthcare specialists. They want to learn about other religions to figure out how to best provide healthcare. And occasionally I'll address that. It seems like there are a lot of nurses in class. I'll say, like, that's a perfectly great thing, and I want you to attain that goal for yourself. I won't really play that ball game, but I can help you if you want to. So sometimes we talk about it, sometimes we don't.
I just want to understand the fundamental kind of thing that so I want to understand why they want to have online teaching from university point of view. What's the advantage of offering online? That one I want to understand.
I'll go. I think it's multiple motives. Okay, there's definitely more than one. There are quite a few schools out there right now that are struggling to stay alive. They don't have enrollments, either because, for a variety of reasons, maybe the population in their area has decreased, whatever. So, motivation one for online learning is staying alive, getting new students. For others that are, it's a moneymaker. Okay, school's doing fine, but this could be an additional revenue source. For others, there is a sense of, there is a motivation, very, personal, of outreach. And as in the story that I told at the beginning, for some educators, for many educators, the idea of bringing something that was once only available to a handful of lucky Stanford students, and to make, and it's programming, which, as you know, people who are into programming, it is practically a religion. What I mean is, they see programming as the path into joining the world. Huge people write a lot about the power of coding and that it allows you to join the world in a way that few other things can. So the point is that the motivation for something is just, we've got to get this stuff out there. Right now we've got this stuff that 20 students a year get to take. Half of them aren't even interested, or whatever, and there's this world out there that is dying to have it, so that's a motivation. There's all kinds of motivations. For some people, it's putting the name of their school on the map. It's a sort of a, you know what I mean, kind of thing. It's just, we just want people to know that we're here. And those are the ones that I'm sure there are others. Maybe other people know other motivations, but...
I'm going to add one, which is impact. And that's especially true here. We do MOOCs, we still do online stuff. And I would say that strategically, part of that is having our name, sure, but if you look at the top schools in the country, instead of having a market share, you have an intellectual share. So if someone is what expert can we call to talk about the current economic crisis? Are they thinking Chicago or are they thinking Harvard? And how do we change that map a little bit? So that's part of it. Maybe it's not just the states. What about Asia? Do they think of us? Are they only thinking of Stanford? Those kinds of questions. And so strategically, it's about where to position yourself and how to do that, while also serving your goals of outreach, sharing knowledge to the general public, access for people who can't make it. It's a complex mix of things.
Does that answer your question? Because it really is, it is a very complex collection of motivations. Did we miss one? Or?
Well, just not institutionally, but individually. The majority of students in my school are now part-time. And many are working full-time, some in ministry, some in other professions. And so, for example, we have a good number of nurses who take courses. And they understand themselves to be in a form of ministry. And so they're taking courses in order to do better the work that they understand themselves to be called to do. And so it's a way of reaching students who may not be able to be on campus in the way that full-time students are.
There's a real equity, justice element to some of this. And I mean, like across the board, like even the two guys who spoke there, that was, there are people out there who need this and can't get it.
The majority of students in higher education now, gay students, are non-traditional, which means they're not 18 to 22, they're not unmarried, they're not without children. They have those things in their lives. And so, if you really want to serve your mission and educate people, you have to change in order to reach these groups of individuals. And that's part of what online can do. We're hearing about these professionals that you guys have. I have children, and I have a job. I'm probably not gonna go to a classroom for 3 hours at night several times a week. That's not gonna happen. Not because I don't care, I'm not smart, or whatever, because it's not practical. And so, adjusting yourself to be able to reach those people is part of our mission. And I think that's an essential.
Questions about MOOCs, if I can.
Well, what?
MOOCs. Well, you mentioned equity and justice, which is interesting. And I was just wondering whether there is any free online course for a university that is accredited and results in a degree that is usable.
That's
we cater to people who can afford accrediting, and then they get a degree. But as far as online courses being open to everyone, those don't result.
That's correct. I mean, I was somewhat in the mix, during the early sort of Coursera years, and Daphne Kohler, had met with her one time when, institutions as well as universities as well as institutions like Coursera were trying to figure out the mix of open and then the grading piece and then just to say the assessment piece and the accreditation piece and does it count? I think what was your phrase that you used?
Yeah. Does it go toward a degree?
Toward a degree. Right. For example, there are pieces of it. Coursera has they have the courses that you can just take, and then you can bump up a level.
Yeah, but so there's a new thing called MicroMasters out, for example, on edX, where, of course, it's eventually the word of mouth. You can get credit to apply to a program at that institution, or you can, there's something that's called a hybrid master's, where you take some of it online early, and then instead of spending 2 years in a residential program, you spend 6 months. Get the same degree, you interact with the same faculty, but you spend far less money and it can fit into your life. So I think that's a possibility. No, you're not going to be free, but you're still doing something.
But even some of the free ones, just very briefly, even some of the free ones, I can envision kinds of industries or kinds of students where what they're getting out of it very practically is a certain kind of advancement within a position they already have. Sure. In other words, rather than trying to get a degree in order to get a position, somebody working for this is an active conversation at Dominican with interfaith leadership. We're saying, look, we want students to take this. We can offer Dominican students to take it. We can offer them a credit. If other students take it, we can offer a certificate, and that their institution may be willing to apply that credit. We're thinking about people working in nonprofits, people working in journalism, who can go to their editor or go to their boss and say, hey, I'm thinking about getting this certificate in interfaith leadership from Duke University, which will help me in the following way, open up a new kind of trajectory within their position. It raises, Dominicans' intellectual footprint to say, now people are, well, I can get a certificate from this institution, and that in some way better equips me. Excellent. So that is just a thought on.
I was just going to say that the Coursera's in particular have actually seen the importance of people getting jobs, but only in the context of programming capabilities, because I think the computer science fields tend to be a little bit more flexible with strict degree structures, although that may be tightening as computer science programs are more common.
I guess I'm more a different question from a different field, a more skeptical field is I guess as a student, like I'm a PhD student, I sort of realized I should try to limit my time on the computer to just writing, and that I struggle with sort of log addictions, all these other sort of things that like distraction. And so like to be a successful student, I'm like, okay, like I want to have my books in my notebook and write notes, and then like just sort of divide my time so that I'm not I don't have a computer touch all the time. That's sort of how I've grown and matured as a student, rather than. But the interesting thing is like in my time as a student, long ago when I was an undergraduate, we had classes. They print an extra book with all the articles you could look at. It's a physical book, and now it's all on the computer. And now in seminars, I see people don't even print it off. I mean, I always print off because I like the physical thing. But people just look, and so I wonder, like, are you worried about sort of making computers such a necessary part of class structure, like given people's sort of, I guess, tendency for them to become distraction, or that people might not read as intensely when they're looking at a screen, or even like if I have to read an article on a computer, my eyes get like tired. I mean, like, are these things people are talking about in terms of performances?
There's a lot of research on this, and especially in like computer interaction in this field, but also in just education generally. Like, are students performing at the same level as they would in a physics class? There's a lot of research on both. And I think the important thing to give is flexibility. So if someone doesn't want to use their computer, they want to put their out, that should be absolutely possible. If they don't have access to the internet all the time, we should be thinking about that. If they can't just like have broadband at home and watch videos all day, we should be thinking about that. It's more about, I think, giving the option for how best to engage with material and how you can be most successful, not about enforcing the strategy of learning these concepts.
I would say, just to forecast a little bit, next year we've been talking about doing a session on student distraction issues. Not specifically pertaining to online teaching, but that's something that's on the radar for fact teaching anyway. Something we'd like to put together.
What's going on? What's fascinating, one thing about this online shift that is always the case with technology, any kind of new technology shift, but nowhere has it ever been bigger than it is in this shift, is people become really obsessed with if it works. Is it working? And the interesting thing is, we don't know if this works. Okay? Just FYI. Alright? We never bothered to wonder, well, don't people get annoyed sitting next to each other all day? All these things, or, what if you're sitting next to somebody you don't like? How can you learn? I mean, in other words, the point is, and this was the great challenge. So online comes as a tidal wave, and both skeptics and believers said, we gotta figure out if this works. And now our ends are so high, we can do some major study that we never could do before in traditional classrooms. But the big challenge, the deciding whether this works or not, there's no baseline. We don't know if college education, in the traditional sense, works, right? And so it makes asking these kinds of questions maybe more important than ever. I think it's great that we're beginning to look at what are the effects of X on student learning.
We're seeing that with lectures. I mean, we're seeing that lectures are not that effective. Like, you can see, you compare different methods in a face-to-face classroom. Lectures are down. Like, it's better to do other things. And yet, what percentage of classes are still lectures in English in America? It really feels not. Even though we know, in fact, that it doesn't work the best. So, great questions to ask. But I think, like Joe was saying, you should be applied for others.
I was just kind of basing off of my own experiences and what you guys have said already. I think a lot of it comes down to how they're teaching. Because I had one summer where I was doing 3 online classes, and yes, it was biology and statistics, which I already have no interest in, which was difficult. But I was also doing an anthropology course. And the anthropology course was fascinating. I loved the presentation. I found it to be really engaging. The biology course, I cooked dinner while I was playing the videos in the background because there was nothing about it that made me say, oh, this is interesting. This is engaging. There was nothing engaging about it. So a lot of it does, I think, come down to how it's actually being taught.
Which is the exact same thing that students do in art classes every day. You know, I either like, wow, this is really interesting, or you sit back and you go, oh, what's for lunch? You know? I mean, it just, but the technology, the shift has made these standard behaviors really present. And I think that's actually a good thing.
One thing that I'd like to mention, again, for those who are seeking jobs, you may request subvention from your employer in school for you to be trained as an online instructor. The University of Wisconsin in Madison has a good program, as does United Theological Seminary in Dayton. They have a 6-course certificate program in online teaching. And some of the courses are interesting, some not so much. But as you know, a poorly done class can yield many good lessons in demystifying the realities of the challenges and opportunities of online instruction.
I think we're basically at time.
Please join your panelists.